I mean, look, directing is very challenging on its own. Acting and directing is even more challenging. And then acting and directing and playing a character like Ryle. And then you mix that with, the complexities of personalities on set, trying to manage everybody's expectations and get everybody kind of moving in the same direction. And, look, every movie has its challenges, and this one was no different.
Hi, besties. It's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. Do you remember how yesterday I said that litigation with a narcissist is hard and that litigation with narcissists creates chaos within everything, not just the people and the parties that they impact, but there's collateral damage around everything, right? And there has been an uproar on social media. There has been frustration going back and forth about what Perez Hilton filed into the court. There has been chaos between creators. This entire situation has been stressful for everyone involved, especially those creators that have been directly targeted by subpoenas. Everyone handles stress differently. Everyone manages their situation their own way. And what I've learned more than anything in this process is that for me, this process was incredibly stressful. I incurred almost $10,000 in cost that, by the way, I still have to pay. And, at the end of the day, I had nothing to do with this. And I will tell you firsthand that going through this process was incredibly stressful. And dealing with Blake's attorneys was painful, especially with the accusations that she made and claimed about me directly to my legal team. And then that was disseminated in a subpoena. And then that was pushed out into the media. And then you got all kinds of pro-lively creators accusing you of crimes that you did not commit. And it is stressful. And then add a layer to that you live in an ecosystem where now she's subpoenaed a bunch of content creators in the same sphere. And then infighting becomes the thing. And it's not fun, but this is what narcissists do. And so here we are. And now it seems that Blake Lively is going to try to just pivot from the chaos she has created with Perez Hilton, the uptick and the uproar that's happening on social. And you have people piling on Perez that are in our own community. I experienced this a couple weeks ago when I went public and I said that I'd been subpoenaed and I had been verified that the subpoena was real. And then suddenly I had a bunch of people pile on me that were supposed to be in the same community, and they were calling me out, essentially implying that I wasn't really subpoenaed or that it wasn't really verified. And then that court sort of just spiraled into, she's not trustworthy, she's a liar, or people making videos about me and me trying to defend myself. And honestly, it didn't, go well then. It's not going well now for Perez, and none of this is helpful. And Blake is loving it all. She loves every single bit of it. But now she's going to completely change directions. And now she's going to go after two former employees or one former employee of TAG, the agency group, Melissa Nathan's company, and trying to get around privilege logs. Do you recall when Wayfair tried to get communications with Edgeworth, the security company that did the data extraction from Jen Abel's phone, or that Stephanie Jones used? And they were trying to get around the privilege by using the crime fraud exception. And do you recall how the judge wasn't moved by it? And then do you recall how she then went to, Blake? So that was Wayfair trying to get around the privilege. And I don't think that Wayfair has tried to get around privilege since. And Blake now has gone to Linear, which is Friedman's law firm, and she tried to get around privilege there, which was denied. And now she's trying to find ways to get around privilege with employees that are on a text string or an email communication, and trying to claim that they are waiving because people that were not represented were a part of these communications. She's also trying to get around journalistic privilege, and she's trying to say that Mr. Hilton is not really a journalist, but he's instead an influencer. And her attorneys are trying to get access to documents that generally are shielded from disclosure through subpoena, but they're using arguments to try to persuade the court that they're not really privileged. And sometimes these arguments work and sometimes they don't. And another thing that they're using is they're finding little loopholes that they're trying to get access to. So like with Perez Hilton, what they did was Perez went into the court in New York and said that he wanted a protective order, and they're claiming that Perez made himself available to jurisdiction in New York for filing that document, which is interesting because when Blake went to Texas to file for a deposition of Jed, she argues that filing for a deposition and seeking pre-litigation depositions in Texas doesn't make her doesn't avail her to Texas jurisdiction. She just had to go there for the purpose of doing a deposition. So in Texas, she's trying to claim that going to Texas and filing claims in Texas doesn't make her a party or under jurisdiction. But then for Perez, she's claiming that Perez seeking a protective order there makes it so that the court has jurisdiction over him. So it depends on what she wants and how she uses it and how these attorneys are trying to frame it. But there's been a lot of, she wants it for her, but she doesn't want it for them. I think a lot of you in the comments are saying like rules for thee and not for me. So last night, she ended up filing this letter to the court, and she's claiming that, two employees of TAG, Brianna and Kate, one who currently works for TAG and one who does not, that these two are withholding information and that they want them to give up information and records, and they're claiming privilege that they should not be claiming. And the letters are relatively similar, so I just want to give you some information. It's the same set of circumstances, and it's really the same communications. But what essentially happened, according to them, is that they did the motion to compel, and then the two employees that were fighting to even have to disclose anything, they ended up doing the data extraction that Blake paid for, and through that production, what happened was Blake's team ended up getting communications in there that were with Wayfair attorneys, and they noticed that the attorneys were included on these, so they decided not to read them. So they contacted them and said, like, listen, I think these are privileged. You might not, you might want these. And so they're saying that they clawed them back, meaning that they said, okay, no, these you can't have. And so after reviewing what had been sent, they said it was an error, and that they then produced privilege logs with 209 and 494 documents from August 2024 to March of 2025. Most of the withheld documents involve certain of the Wayfair parties, their counsel, and other third parties, including Jed Wallace, whom the Wayfair defendants have credited with shifting the conversation about Lively in August 24. And they say the Wayfair parties did not serve their own privilege log with respect to the Case Coslow productions, instead adopting those provided by Case and Coslow respectively. The Case Coslow productions and privilege logs fail to carry the burden to justify the privileges. They're claiming that Coslow identifies 241 documents with Friedman related to confidential legal strategy and discussions of draft materials prepared in anticipation of asserting counterclaims. And the Wayfair defendants and Ms. Wallace did not become aware of the New York Times article that was subject to their affirmative claims until December 20th, 2024. Now, I don't know about that. See, because they knew back in August when Leslie Sloan threatened them and said, we saw your emails, you're going to be sued. Remember that? That was part of the claims made by Wayfair. And also at the same time, Stephanie Jones was in a fight with Wayfair, fighting and TAG about possible litigation against them. And so it would have to be on the basis that it was only related to Blake and it was only related to this claim. But if they knew in August that she was thinking about suing them, they can absolutely prepare for counterclaims, or even for counterclaims against Jones if Jones is threatening a lawsuit. And so what they're trying to say is that, well, they're not really privileged because they didn't know about the lawsuit until December. And then they're also trying to claim that the TAG employee's presence on the communications in category 2 defeat the privilege because a party invoking the attorney-client privilege must show that A, the communications between the client and the counsel was intended to be and was in fact kept confidential and was made for the purpose of obtaining and providing legal advice. And from December 28th to January 8th, confidential legal strategy discussions and drafting materials prepared in anticipation of asserting counterclaims. But the documents include, among others, TAG employees Case and Coslow and Caroline Hurley, who are not parties to the litigation and whose presence may constitute a waiver. TAG employees, if TAG is being sued and TAG is a party to the lawsuit, which they are, the employees should be covered by a privilege, according to an attorney that I spoke to today. And so I don't know how this is going to work. So that's kind of a stretch, I think. And Miss Case was not an employee by TAG by sometime in December, and that because she was a former employee, then it's not privileged. So again, they're trying to use loopholes, and we'll have to see how her attorneys respond. And then they're also claiming that because Mr. Wallace was on these communications, he also is waiving this. They're trying to claim a common interest doctrine, which this is a claim that happens when you have parties with similar interests in a legal case that want to communicate privileged, but so like in this case, people that are being subpoenaed by Blake that have a common interest in the case that are both on the defense. And so their attorneys want to be able to exchange information. And so it's a common interest, like they're all working collaboratively in a defense against Blake. So they're trying to get around all these different ways of privilege. They're trying to say that, Miss Case doesn't have work product doctrine because they're trying to so their argument is that all PR professionals indicates that the conversations were directed not at the conduct of litigation, but for other extrajudicial media strategies. It is thus impossible to assess the work product claim regarding the communications. So their assumption is that again, these people are not really attorneys and they're not working with PR people that are that are currently being sued at this point. No, instead, these people are actually working in a PR strategy. So again, this is not them being lawyers. This is them being PR. And this argument didn't work in terms of trying to get the documents from Friedman's firm. They're also claiming that because Katie Case was speaking to her dad, who happens to be attorney, that is not at all allowed because even though he's an attorney, she's not party to any litigation. And they're saying the only plausible reason she could have sought legal advice at the time is if she believed that her actions might have exposed her to liability. Or maybe the fact that Leslie Sloan said that she was going to get sued and that, Jones Works was threatening to sue TAG. So they kind of always seem to take like the worst possible outcome because that's what their argument is. And then they're asking that, the court review all of these in camera if there's any doubt. And they're also trying to get access to the company that put up the website, the lawsuit info, which basically just posted 2 court records. It posted the amended complaint and it posted the Exhibit A, which was the timeline of relevant events that was attached to the complaint, and neither of which were struck from the docket. The complaint was ultimately dismissed, but it was a court record at one point in time. And really all that website did was have links to the complaint and the attachment. That was it. So it was accessible to the public. And so now they want communication about how this was coordinated because in the view of Lively and her attorneys, they're trying to claim filing a counterclaim against her was employment retaliation for bringing up claims of harassment, which is kind of a stretch. So, like I said, lawyers will sometimes try to take unique routes in order to get access to documents that other party asserts as privileged. And I can assure you that if Wayfair did this to them, they would have a hissy fit and they would run up and down the street and say, no, 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 no. Like, this is privileged, this is privileged, this is privileged. And I will say that while I don't always agree with Judge Lyman, and I find many of his rulings completely biased and in favor of Blake Lively, he has, for the most part, been pretty clear when it comes to privilege, and he has not, for either side, been breaking privilege. And he has been stating that attorneys that are using these claims are doing so in good faith. He's trusting the attorneys that are issuing these in good faith. He's not going against the privilege logs, and he is being pretty consistent in protecting the privilege because of the precedent that it would send across the district, right? So what I see Blake doing is kind of scrambling to get information that she otherwise shouldn't have. And she's trying to strengthen this argument that parties that are in a process of considering litigation are actually retaliating against her. And so it's not that they had valid claims against her. Her view is that no, this strategy was not actually to sue us, it was to retaliate. And I don't see how that would actually be an adverse employment retaliation under the law, which is sort of the view that Wayfair has taken and is the view that they may take when it comes to the defamation claims and the ongoing smear campaign. And then finally, I was on TikTok and I saw a video by Little Girl Attorney, and she was discussing the sanctions that Blake Lively's team is seeking. And she had an interesting view. She's a lawyer, and she was explaining how Lively's team is basically using this rule 3.6, which is trial publicity, which are rules that are set by the court. It's enforced regardless, it's not reinforced. But Blake's team, when they did the gag order, was trying to claim that they got extra enforcement of 3.6. It's always enforced, no matter what. And apparently, according to Blake and the team, and according to that statement that she made in the deposition about how they're going after her character, smearing her character in the media. Well, Little Girl Attorney was explaining that trial publicity is these types of sanctions are very rarely ever granted. And there is an effort by attorneys where there's certain details they're not supposed to provide to the public that could tamper a jury or influence them. There's statements that they could make that could impact the jury or influence them negatively. But she noted that any of the statements that were made by Friedman, she didn't believe kind of reached that bar that it would be impeding, because she was discussing how oftentimes he was being asked questions that were being put out into the public by Blake's team, and he was responding to those. And so there's this stipulation within 3.6, which basically states that attorneys they're permitted when they are made in response to statements made publicly by another party's lawyer, or third persons, where a reasonable lawyer would believe a public response is required in order to avoid prejudice to the lawyer's client. When prejudicial statements have been publicly made by others, responsive statements may have the effect of lessening any resulting adverse impact on the adjudicative proceedings, such as responsive statements should be limited to contain only such information as it's necessary to mitigate undue prejudice created by the statements made by others. So if her team goes out there and makes, defamatory statements about Mr. Wayfair and Mr. Baldoni and claims all these horrible things, they could indirectly be prejudicing the jury. And so Wayfair has a right to respond to that because it could impact their client. So they have this ability to vigorously advocate for their clients. So according to that attorney, she didn't think that the sanctions were really going to be granted in this case, and she wasn't really sure why they would go all the way back to February and try to claim that he keeps speaking now. There very well could have been something that happened in the deposition where she doesn't want, or she didn't have a good experience in the deposition. And listen, depositions are not fun, and they, opposing counsel can be brutal, and it can be intimidating to be on the receiving end of questions that are uncomfortable. And I don't know. A lot of the attacks on Brian feel like he's being scapegoated because she's trying to, like, in a way, I'd say, reduce his credibility so that, if he had information about her, people wouldn't take him seriously. It seems to be a very common tactic with narcissists in general, is that if there's someone that has truth, they're going to attack the person that has the truth. And then that person that has the truth becomes a scapegoat of all of their problems, which is, I think, what she's been doing to Justin Baldoni for a long time. And frankly, what I've been seeing across the board with how she's dividing creators as a whole. And none of us are perfect, and we all have our breaking points. And I will say that again, with these subpoenas, it has been very hard for everyone involved. And it has combined people in a group, and some people in that group don't want to be part of the group. You know, for me, I have always been the kind of creator that sticks to myself, and I have never had the best experiences collaborating with other creators. That doesn't mean that I don't have good relationships with creators. I've just never been a collaborative creator. I've never been someone to be in a group, and I have a lot of anxiety dealing with confrontation. I have a lot of anxiety when I try to stick up for myself. I am trying to constantly please my audience. And so I try not to say things about people. And then if I do, then I'm accused of starting stuff. And so I constantly feel like, in this sort of ecosphere that we're in with digital content creation and independent journalism, it creates a very, toxic environment. And I don't always know what people's intentions are. And I have a lot of personal anxiety. And so I just have the tendency to not want to deal with it. I hate confrontation adamantly. And then if I do speak up, I get just annihilated. And so then I just don't want to say anything at all. And so I'm always balancing, do I stick up for myself? Do I share why I said what I said? Or do I be vague so that I'm not dragging someone so I don't upset my audience? The last thing I ever want to do is upset my audience because you guys are here to, view me, and I don't want to get into fights with other people. So Blake has created an environment where we are now starting to attack each other, and I don't want to be a part of that. So I think if I don't know. And I think we all need to be at a place too with our audiences, just my last take, that we don't have to be the answer for for our audience. Like I if I don't want to personally be associated with a creator, that doesn't mean my audience can't watch that creator. If I have a personal issue with someone, a personal issue, or if I have a moral issue or whatever it is where I don't want to be associated with someone, that's my right. But that doesn't mean that my audience can't watch them. I don't care. I want you guys to go wherever you want to go to watch whoever you want to watch. Do I personally like every single person involved in this ecosphere? Probably not. I mean, not everyone likes everyone. I'm also not a group person. And again, I have extreme anxiety. So, and I hate confrontation. Hate it. Hate it. So, long story short, Blake is loving the chaos that she is creating. And the best thing that everyone can do is to try to stay on the path of not engaging in any of it. And if engagements or, you know, if flare ups happen, that we don't, as a whole, dictate who our audiences can and cannot watch. I don't care who watches who, where you go, what you do you. There's room for everyone on YouTube, but not everyone is going to be friends, regardless of how much we want this to be. And what I think the subpoenas have done is it's forced people into a group that maybe didn't want to be associated with other people. And so that's created this bubble up effect, which could have presumably been exactly what Blake wanted, knowing full well that people weren't connected, knowing that people had diametrically opposed belief systems, and some people didn't get along with each other, and then lumping them all together, forcing them to be in the same group. And that's going to create chaos. And I think she got the desired effect. She won. So we'll see what the judge says here. But my best advice, I guess, I don't have any advice, honestly. I would just say we all need to have a little bit more empathy. So what are you guys' thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.